on to contemporary psychological theories of crime. And I'll begin first with operant conditioning, which is a type of learning theory. It builds upon classical conditioning that we talked about last week. The idea behind operant conditioning is that there are environmental consequences to behavior. It's not just that people learn from watching. We can learn by doing, and how people respond to our behavior can dictate whether that behavior will be repeated or exterminated. So we can think about punishment and reinforcement, and there are negative forms of punishment and reinforcement and positive forms of punishment and reinforcement. I want you to think about negative and positive, not in terms of like good and bad. Think about it more from like a mathematical standpoint. Negative is to subtract something or to take something away, whereas positive is to add something. So when we're thinking about positive reinforcement, we're talking about adding something. When we're talking about negative reinforcement, we're talking about the removal of something. So reinforcement is when we want the behavior to continue, and punishment is when we want to exterminate the behavior. So negative punishment means removing something that the individual would like. Positive punishment means applying something detrimental that the person would not like to try and stop the behavior. Positive reinforcement would be the application of something that someone likes. Negative reinforcement would be the removal of something that someone doesn't like. So for example, we want people to be encouraged to put on a seatbelt. We want to see continued behavior of wearing a seatbelt. And so if you're driving and you're not wearing a seatbelt, you'll hear that little ding, 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 ding that goes off until you put your seatbelt on. So you have this negative stimulus in the environment, but when you engage in a particular behavior, that stimuli goes away. We are removing something negative from a person's environment to ensure that the behavior occurs. Positive punishment, like classical examples, would be giving a kid an allowance for taking out the garbage or doing the dishes, any type of chore. When we think about using incarceration for youth, we can think about this maybe both in terms of positive and negative punishment. On the one hand, it's applying something that they do not like. But on the other hand, it's also taking away certain freedoms that they also value. So we can see how it can work potentially in two ways. So I've left this table up for you just to help for studying purposes, but I've put three terms down there at the bottom that are important to mention because they're sort of key tenets of the justice system. They are celerity, certainty, and severity. So whether a behavior is being punished or reinforced, the likelihood of those strategies being successful can be dependent on celerity, certainty, and severity. Celerity refers to the swiftness of the response. So if an individual did something wrong and is only punished like 13 years later, they're less likely to learn from that punishment. Certainty is about the probability that the behavior will be rewarded or punished. So if an individual believes that it's not likely that they're going to get punished, then they might be more likely to engage in a particular behavior. I don't like the term severity because it's kind of misleading. What severity is really referring to is proportionality. I think they just like that acceleration sound of certainty, severity, and celerity. Severity is making sure that the reward or the punishment matches the behavior in question. To put this now into a criminological context, C. Ray Jeffrey is maybe most well known for looking at differential reinforcement. It's basically just taking those operant conditioning principles and extending them to criminal behavior. So individuals learn by doing. But there is a kind of a problem with saying that crime occurs because individuals are reinforced for that behavior. The reason why it's problematic is because it does not explain how the criminal behavior actually begins in the first place. Why did an individual initiate that criminal behavior? The initiation of the criminal behavior can't be explained by reinforcement because reinforcement is based on an individual's past experiences. So a first-time offender has no past experience. So this is where social learning theory really began to emerge to try and fill this gap. And again, remember, social learning and social learning theory are different things. Akers' social learning theory is talking about the intersection between differential association theory and differential reinforcement theory. So it calls this the DART.
It's the DART. They call this the DART.
Or the differential association reinforcement theory. So this helps address issues with Jeffrey's perspective by bringing together the idea that maybe an individual will initiate criminal behavior because he has seen or she has seen others rewarded for it, but maybe they will continue that behavior based on whether that behavior was rewarded or punished, or the probability of reward versus punishment, and so on. What Akers does well is also clarify some of those early learning principles about how the priority of a person's learning matters. So whether a person is learning from somebody, they see somebody engaged in a particular behavior and they respect that person, or that person reinforces or punishes their behavior, is going to be impactful in terms of whether the behavior starts or whether the behavior continues. So basically the strength of deviancy is going to continue based on those principles of severity, certainty, and celerity. Akers referred to peers, the media, and family as sort of three modalities or ways that we would learn from, or people that we would learn from, that would be particularly important for understanding the development of criminal behavior.